It is my pleasure to introduce Williams President Maud S. Mandel, now going into her 6th academic year, and Martha Williamson, a member of the class of 1977. A small shout out for Martha. In addition to the many volunteer hats she has worn for Williams, she just took on a new role as chair of the Ephraim Williams Society, and she's also a member of her class's Gift Purpose Committee as they look to their 50th reunion, a very special milestone for many in the room who I know have gone through it or soon will be. So please join me in welcoming Maud and Martha.
Good morning. Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here, and especially here with so many old friends. Means a great deal to be sitting up here. It is an honor, and especially an honor to be talking to Maud. I always choke up when I talk about Maud. Every single time it's getting to be a joke. So we're going to spend some time with Maud. We're going to have a conversation about the college, and some of the questions are mine, and some of the questions are things that some of you folks asked me to ask last night, and some other friends put forward to me. And we're going to hear from Maud for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to some questions from all of you. So let's start with something I know could fill the entire hour. But tell me one thing, your favorite thing that's happened on campus since the beginning of the year.
I can't say right now today. I will say just before I answer that question, it's really thrilling to have everybody back. And I think I just heard that we have over 300 people here, which is back to pre-pandemic attendance for these events. And that's really wonderful. I'm just thrilled to have everybody here. One thing is very hard for me always, but particularly that question. I think what I would like to say is sort of a thing I do. I have lunch, as you may know, every couple of weeks on campus, and I have an open table. I usually bring a colleague, and we just sit with whoever wants to sit with us. Sometimes nobody wants to sit with us, to be clear, but usually. And actually more this year, so far at least, we've had students, and every time I ask them, it's kind of one of my stock questions, you know, what's your favorite class this semester? Which one are you getting the most out of? And every time, basically, somebody will say, "Oh, I can't pick. They're all so good." That's my favorite thing.
There you go. You were named the 18th president of Williams College in March of 2018. And exactly 2 years and 2 days later, the country essentially shut down in response to the pandemic. And it's fair to say you faced your first crisis as president. And it was a trial by fire. I got a first-hand seat watching you do it. And it's fair to say that you led the college through it so skillfully. And then you and your senior staff barely had a chance to catch your breath before new issues came up that you had to deal with. The Supreme Court ruling on college admissions, assaults on the value of higher education. Closer to home, we have the joys of maintaining the infrastructure of a 230-year-old campus. The college's commitment to diversity as a cornerstone of our identity as the premier liberal arts college in the nation. Health and wellness issues of our students. And all of which we're going to try to ask you to solve before lunch today. But before we look at the work that the college is doing and the work that you're doing, I want to ask you about something you didn't do. And we're going to start with a very recent event, and it was the release of an institutional statement that you released responding to the attacks by Hamas on Israelis and the deaths of Palestinian civilians in the military, resulting military retaliation. And I will, as an aside, there's been some very supportive and publicity regarding that since then, regarding your letter and some institutional publications inside higher ed, for example. But you've issued responses to other events, but this was different. So tell us what changed, how you arrived at your decision, and what the college is doing to support the students who have, a variety of concerns.
So thank you for the question. I assume, I think many people know about this now because we circulated what I wrote out on Eve Notes, but just really quickly to make sure everyone's on the same page. In the aftermath of the horrific events that took place in Israel, now 2 weeks ago, many colleges and universities put out statements in response to those events. And I didn't. I was silent, publicly silent, although I'll say something about the students. And then I started to get, a fair number of responses about why I was silent and concerned about that. And so I decided that I would issue a statement explaining why I hadn't put out a statement. If you're interested in that and haven't seen it, it's on my webpage. It's actually fairly long, and so I'm not going to respell it out entirely here. But what I want to say, just to be clear, to get to your question, is actually I had made that decision long before that event. So last year, actually it was a series of events, but I had decided it prior to the Ukrainian war last year. And a number of things have led up to it. And you're quite right that I have issued statements in the past. And I've learned things from having issued statements in the past. And it was really being a lifelong learner, like the rest of us in the room, from having made that decision in the past, learning what some of the challenges and problems were. And I remember being at an alumni event after a massive shooting. It was one of the big public shootings that took place in this country and take place so regularly. And somebody asked me if the college was going to put out a statement about the shooting. And we didn't, and I found myself saying, we don't actually have domestic policy at Williams. It's not what we do. And then I kept just thinking more about the problems that were associated with speaking out about some things and not other things. And so one of my really challenging sort of reflections on this is how much we don't put out statements about it. And in fact, when I didn't put out a statement for the Ukrainian war, there were a couple of Ukrainian students, who were very upset about that. But actually, I didn't hear from anybody else. And that's sort of the point, right? Like the things people want to hear about and what they don't want to hear about are sort of really ripped from our headlines in a particular moment. They're very vexing. But our job, I really feel deeply, is to teach students how to think, not what to think, and that these statements actually were sort of getting in the way of that process. And so I felt, though, in the need of this moment where so many folks were putting out statements, that it was important to clarify and explain my perspective on that. I should say, you will still hear from me if there's a policy issue that directly affects Williams. So there are domestic policy issues that actually have an impact on the college. And those I do feel it's appropriate for somebody who's administering a college to react to, not necessarily by saying what she personally thinks, but by explaining how the institution is going to respond. That feels to me like an appropriate role for a president. And so that's where you'll continue to hear from me on issues of our times in that way. But I should say, and it's really important, the second part of your question, what we're doing for students. And it also felt really important to say that people are really struggling and will continue to struggle on the campus to make sense of what's happening. There's a lot of grief, there's anger, people are afraid, all kinds of levels of responses. And really there is where I'm hoping we're leaning in. We had an ecumenical vigil for all the civilian victims last week, which was, in my opinion, a very beautiful event, which I was able to attend, and our chaplains co-organized that to speak to our collective community. And I'm continuing to try to figure out ways that we can support. I obviously meet with subgroups of students consistently to try to support them and help them understand and move through the really deep political convictions and emotions that have come out of this moment. And then absolutely most importantly, what we do in classrooms and how we teach and educate ends up becoming the most direct and important impact we can have on students. And I know faculty across the institution who actually know something about the region, who actually have expertise, who've studied it and learned it, are working with students in classrooms to do that work.
Thank you. I read your statement twice, and I found something new in it each time. So it's definitely worth taking a look. And I've actually heard instances of folks who started reading it and with one opinion, and their opinions were changed by the time they got to the end of it. So please look that up on the website. Now, we're finishing the full year of the implementation of the college's first in the nation all-grant financial program. And that established us as the leader, I think, in true affordability. I mean, first in the nation, guys. I mean, that's a big deal. It's very Williams, very Williams.
Thank you.
But in 50 words or less, Maude, try. Can you give some of us a description of what that means? What is an all-grant program, what it actually is, and then what have we learned from our first year and the impact of it here?
Thank you. My husband, who's over there, will tell you I've never answered a question in 50 words or less, ever. So just quickly, the all-grant True Affordability Initiative focused on leveling, to the best of our ability, the experiential opportunities for students by making sure that students on financial aid would no longer have loans in their packages for financial aid, which other schools had done, and also doing away with the work-study components of their financial aid. And so now all students on financial aid who receive support from the college have those two aspects removed. It has been very effective, and we have had a tremendous response from students, both in kind of what they say about it, and also just what we've learned from surveying them around their experience and what drew them to Williams. So I'll just tell you a couple of facts which we got from surveying students who are here, who had just come and who are going through the journey. So we obviously have done surveying of all the classes. So there was a 12% drop on all students working, but actually the majority of Williams students still have jobs, which is actually what we expected to have happen, and that is still true. That crosses those on financial aid and not on financial aid. So there was a drop, but it wasn't substantial. What there was a more substantial drop in, which we were thrilled about, was the number of hours they work. So there was about a 20% drop in the number of hours that they work, even as we raised the bar on how many hours they could work if they wanted to, which students had been calling for some time. And nevertheless, there was a drop. Of course, the most substantial impact of this is they can take those earnings home with them, they can send them to their families, they can save them for loans they have already taken out that they need to pay back, but what they don't have to do is funnel them to their term bill. And so students are still working, but fewer hours. We also, and this we have to keep tracking because it's too soon to really know the impact, but it's one of the things I'm most interested in. We saw a 10% growth in students on financial aid asking for alumni, what we call ASIPs, which are alumni-sponsored internships. The reason that's a significant factor is students only apply for those when they have low-paid or no-paid internships. So the idea is to help students, particularly middle-income students, who are trying to make as much money as possible over the summer to pay Williams, now opening up the opportunities in the summer of the things they can do. So we only have one summer of data. It's a little early to declare victory there, but the 10% increase suggests that there's real movement. Borrowing is down by 70%, and only 9% of our students on financial aid took loans, which is amazing. And the number of students with more than $1,000 on their term bill at time of graduation dropped by 90%, which is just a stunning achievement. Thank you. I'm going to just say one last thing about this. Williams has been tremendously generous with financial aid for a long time. This was building on a history of financial aid support at this college. That's really been thanks to alumni support that this college is able to do these kinds of things. We announced this initiative without raising any money for it. We are raising money for it now. And I'm sort of thanking you as a collective body for all the support that you have done for this initiative in the past and we hope very much in the future, because it has, as you can hear, made a real difference in the lives of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a student who spent a summer internship sitting as a docent, or actually a door watcher in Lawrence Hall back in '77, I particularly understand how important that particular element was. It's remarkable. And speaking of the art museum, you arrived at Williams with a plan to create a strategic plan. And despite the pandemic, you kept that on track and saw it completed in record time. One of the major initiatives of the college 2021 strategic plan is the Arts in Williams, with its centerpiece project, the construction of a new Williams College Museum of Art. And it was interesting, I was walking in just now and I saw a big sign that said, "Art is essential." And of course, I agree with that, but I'm so glad you do too, because I know this is very close to your heart. Now this is, as we heard before, this is still a work in progress. But can you give us sort of an update on how we got here and where we're going and what's looking?
Yeah, and I know you just had a session on this, so I will try on the 50 words or fewer. But what I hope has come through to you about this project is two really key things. The first is that Williams has a tremendously long and storied history of being a leader in educating undergraduates and graduate students, small numbers, but really important program in graduate students in the arts. We have a 100-year-old tradition of using the arts as part of a liberal arts education. So it's not just training curators in a graduate program, but actually teaching interdisciplinary a focus on a broad liberal arts education that winds the using of art into that. So this is a teaching museum. It is and some of you have heard me say this, but it always bears repeating that this new museum functions for faculty who use art in their teaching, which is faculty across the curriculum, the way the science building helps physicists or chemists do their work. It is a teaching museum, first and foremost, and builds on a tremendous history. And I'll just do my favorite game. How many of you took art history when you were at Williams? Yeah, look around, right? Huge impact. And so we are building on that tradition and making sure we can claim 100 years from now that this has remained a significant contribution of Williams. And this gets to my second point, not just to Williams, but for the wider world, because many of you read, and sometimes one of the questions I get is, are you worried about the humanities? What's happening to the humanities? We are putting a stake in the ground that's central to a liberal arts education is an engagement with all forms. It's not just the visual arts, of course, but the arts, that the arts are a big part, look at the room we're in, right, of a student's education. And they don't have to go on to become professional artists or collectors for that to factor in their humanist understanding of the world. And this is really our way of doing that. I know you heard some faculty, across our disciplinary range here, who use our amazing collection in order to teach students in a broad array of types of courses, approaches to knowledge, and it's a really powerful part of, I think, what Williams is and can be going forward.
Thank you. So Lawrence Hall was built in 1846. It does need a revisit at any rate. Town Field House was built in 1970, so they don't build them like they used to. And so some of us have heard that Town Field House is going to be demolished this year at the end of the year. And can you tell us about your plans in general for athletic facilities, our commitment to athletics, and maybe even a little bit touching on our commitment to health and wellness in general?
Thank you. Great question. So So if you've had the pleasure of reading our long, wordy strategic plan, you'll know that in addition to a focus on the arts, we have a pretty significant sort of directed long-term goal in the strategic plan to address wellness and athletics, but also athletics defined broadly at Williams, and all the ways in which taking care of oneself is really part of the Williams tradition. And much like that art history, the art museum dates back 100 years. Actually, the PE requirement at Williams dates back that long and has not lasted at many institutions. Many institutions started with such a requirement, but it's gone away. Here at Williams, it's wound through the fabric. Not every single student is a varsity athlete, although we have 35% of our students are varsity athletes, so it's a large number. But 100% of our students take phys ed courses, and of course the rest of us, faculty, staff, and folks in the community need good facilities for taking care of themselves, because we understand that the brain functions better when the body is also functioning, and that's also a deep Williams value. So that was in there. That was in the plan. In my mind, this was staged. So we were going to do sort of the arts project and then move on to this next big project, and many of you have heard me talk about how this was a 10 to 15 year plan for Williams. So the Fieldhouse had another idea and said that we should move faster. And that was not surprising to too many people, because we've known that the building had challenges, but it turns out they were more challenging than even I was aware. So yes, we've now accelerated and leaned into that problem, but it wasn't unlike some of the other problems you mentioned, a pandemic that sort of came out of left field and knocked me over. This one we knew was out there, and actually we were in pretty good shape for dealing with it. We had just done a space study of campus that had helped us articulate and think about a wellness district. There was an assumption built into that we were going to be addressing the Fieldhouse. We had been thinking about strategic fundraising and how we were going to do what we needed to do to move to assemble the resources for this work. So it may have appeared out in the universe as unexpected, but we think we were in a pretty good position. We've moved quickly. Actually, the Fieldhouse won't. The current Fieldhouse will be gone, we are beginning to take it down in November. So that's starting to, that we're just waiting till after homecoming, because we use that area and we can't rope it off before then. But then that will start to come down. We're in the process of building what we're calling a multi-purpose resource center down near the tennis courts, and that will serve as an interim field house. It's going to take a while. Every structure, even one that isn't bricks and mortar in a standard sense, takes a long time to put up, but we're moving as quickly as we can, and that will be an interim field house until such time as we've come up with a more permanent solution, and then it will likely be used for indoor tennis. I would say we have time to sort of figure that out. So we're in the process of figuring out what its longer-term purpose will be afterwards. Meanwhile, the board, thank you, approved funding out of a very generous gift that we got this summer from the WEM Foundation, that's both helping to contribute to the Multipurpose Resource Center and funding the study. So that's what we're doing now, the next, what we call a program study, which is the next thing you do. And when you're listening out there, it's like, really? You're studying, first you did a space study and now you're doing a program study. But just to explain, the program study, what it does is really start to think about, okay, if you want to build something that's going to last for a good amount of time to serve a large number of people, a huge diversity of teams, also non-varsity athletes, what do you need to put in there? What do you want to put in it? And then what do you need to put in it? And then what can you afford to put in it? So we sort of have to go through all of those steps, and that takes a while. So we're doing the program study that, as I say, has been approved. But I can assure you that this is very much moving forward, even though it will probably take a number of years before we can, cut a ribbon on an actual facility.
Thank you. Just on a personal note, I think it's fair to say that most of us going to Williams during the 70s did not see an abundance of health and wellness emphasis. And as a woman in 1973, 50 years ago, entering Williams, I know that I entered along with a number of women and discovered later a number of men. We all arrived with high expectations of ourselves and a high motivation to live up to the academics, and that hasn't changed. And but the pressures on our students seem to be greater and greater. And I just want to thank you, because your insistence and persistence and commitment to looking at wellness and expanding that and redefining it and making it available to our students is not only admirable and much appreciated, but the students love it. They know you care. They know you care.
I appreciate that, and I should say, as part of our broader focus on wellness, we do have really focused work going into now, thinking about how we would develop a program to support incoming students broadly. I'm moving away now from the realm of taking care of the brain and the body together, but also sort of resiliency, navigating challenges, managing anxiety. I think we all know from reading the papers and having young people in our lives and paying attention to college campuses that there's real pressure in these areas. And so we have a wonderful head of integrative well-being here, and she's really, I think, quite a visionary, and she's really been working to think through how we could create a program for all students to help and empower them as they go through Williams, navigating all of those challenges while they're here. And so that's probably going to start with some kind of winter study program. We're really doing a lot of work on winter study in general, but I suspect it will start there, ideally grow, and really ideally eventually touch all students. But we're working through the beginnings of thinking through what that might look like now.
Speaking of anxiety,
I got none. I don't know what you're talking about.
None. It seems like everybody I speak to about Williams, alumni and others, want to talk about admissions, and particularly coming out of the Supreme Court ruling on race-based affirmative action and subsequent announcements by peer institutions to end legacy. So before we open it up for questions, I know we want to hear about that.
So yes, actually, until this week, that was the thing I got the most emails about ever. But I have a new record now. Again, I think most people know a little bit of the background here, so I don't want to say too much, but the Supreme Court obviously made a historic change in their approach to the way what colleges and universities can do in the space of admissions. And I put out a letter at the time about that, and noting a few key things, which I'll just reiterate here. The first is diversity of a course remains a core value at Williams, defined broadly. And if we want to talk about this more in the question and answer period, I can certainly talk about why that is and what we think we learn from that. But that's been a core value for a long time, and really has transformed who is on this campus, who works here, who studies here, and ultimately over time the shape of the alumni body. We obviously also are going to follow the law. That was also in that letter, and I just have to say it every time I speak about this. We will figure out how to reach our goals in the bounds of the law. It is important to note that colleges and universities always review their admissions policies. So actually, the context has changed, but not the fact that admissions is changing. And I should just note to this august group of people that the way admissions worked when you came to Williams is not the way it worked when I applied to college, and is different than the way it was when I started working in a university, which is now different than it is now. So admissions has changed over time. We've never changed in our goal, which is to get really talented, exceptional students who are hungry to learn, to come to this intense, small, wonderful place to live and learn together, right? That goal remains the same, but how we do it and who we bring has shifted over time. So this is not new that we are reviewing and thinking about our admissions policies, but obviously the context has changed a bit. We have set up a working group that includes senior staff, some faculty representatives, and some members of the Board of Trustees whose job it is to really go deep in the data and the history, look at what we've done in the past, understand what the constraints are, the ways in which we've made decisions, what we've valued, and really to do that as a way to help the board as it navigates thinking at a high level about admissions at Williams. Specifically to your question on the legacy issue, I want to say that we didn't go into this work with any preconceived ideas about some big change we were going to make. It's not sort of, Maud, are you just trying to map a way to make a change? Really, it was to study where we've been, how the context has changed over time, which it has, and what that means for Williams, and very importantly, what's right for Williams. And I think it's really important, maybe the last thing I'll say about this, to me, my own point of view, which is that we not move too quickly, whatever we do. That is, there was a lot of kind of urgency and upset and even some schools making big declarations immediately after the SCOTUS announcement was made. My own approach is that we, and I think it's a Williams approach really, which is we want to actually study this. We want to understand what, for example, a year or two of admissions yields. What was the impact? How are we able to reach our admissions goals in the current landscape? What are schools doing? What is the data showing? What are new research showing? Because there was a lot of research that came out this summer that also has an impact on how we think about these things. So that's really what the working group is doing, and as I say, feeding into a board conversation.
There's no question, now that I've had an opportunity to spend so much time on campus now, the quality of the students is absolutely superior, just amazing students. And I would say in many cases, in the last 2 weeks, in the last years that I've seen, they behave better than some of the adults. So I get very excited, and I take every opportunity to speak with them, and thank you for taking those lunches to talk with them as well.
We'll just say we have an amazing student body. They are actually pretty staggering a lot of the time. And it's thanks to the hard work of the admissions office, which sort of navigates the world we're in to find them and bring them here. And so I'm very grateful to them. Can I say one side note thing? I'll just, one quick thing about them. I just wanted to say, a couple of you have heard me say this, but last year I had the opportunity to hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon with 8 Williams students and spend a few days there with Scott Lewis. It was a service trip. It was his last trip last year, so I wanted to take advantage and have that incredible opportunity. Was an incredible opportunity. But the main thing I took away after a few days down there with these 8 totally random students, they weren't friends with, I thought I'd end up with like a team or a group of friends from a dorm who had all signed up for this. But actually it was a mix of students, all years, backgrounds, it really was a diverse slice, if I can use that word again, of the campus and of the globe. And my main thought after 3 days down there was like tremendous gratitude for the admissions office, because they were so smart and so nice. I was like, how did they do this? So it's really amazing, and really welcoming to me, which was, I'm sure strange to have me as a bunkmate in one of the rooms. So.
That's, when I was looking at colleges back in 1972, 73, a friend of mine came back and said, you got to go to Williams. Those are the nicest people I saw at all the colleges I visited on the East Coast, and that hasn't changed. That is what I like to call the Williams way. So we're going to talk about, we're going to open it up for some questions. Please wait for the microphone to come to you. Raise your hand, please wait for the microphone to come to you. Let's keep it one question short, and as tempting as it will be, let's keep it in the form of a question, please. Okay? Hands up. Dusty, let's go.
He's right down here.
Right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Maud, for this session. I'll say a very brief comment. You've asked and addressed, I think, the questions that are on the top of everybody's mind.
Good.
And I appreciate your going right at the important issues of the day. My question has to do with athletics. You said, Maud, 35% of the students play on varsity sports, so 65% don't. Could you say a little bit about the college's thinking or even plan about how to organize athletics, or not just wellness, but athletics for those who don't play on varsity sports?
Oh, I'm really glad you asked that question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, moving quickly, I mentioned the PE commitment, but I should say that, we have 800 students who are members of the outing club. We have students who don't play varsity sports, but who play sports in our intramural teams. The CDE students play soccer, with intramural teams, for example. So lots of students engage athletically. We have students who take dance classes, right, who are doing it as an academic credit, actually. So we have lots of students who engage athletically. And then, of course, we just have the folks who want to use the gym and work out or be in a yoga studio, right, and engage in that way. So I think what's really important to me about this program study, and it's maybe the most pointed way to answer your question, is to make sure that when we study what the right facilities approaches to Williams, that we're not just talking to varsity athletes, that we're actually talking to people who would use facilities, however defined, and that we think broadly about what we mean about wellness, athleticism, physicality. I'm actually still struggling with the right word, because people associate wellness now with usually either kind of psychological focus or mindfulness, which is fine. That's part of it too, right? Yoga and mindfulness and meditation. But what we're really talking about here is living well. Like, one of the things you learn at college is how to live well, or at least ideally. And I actually think these days, and I speak not only about Williams, it's been quite hard to attain that goal. Our students come really hypercharged. They're very accomplished already when they get here. They have a lot of pressure. They put a lot of pressure on themselves. They come from systems. Even the varsity athletes are sort of got here in a way that most of you who were athletes did not, like the pressure. So they come hypercharged, and I find myself in a weird position, both as a parent and as a college president, of wanting to say, it's, breathe. Don't work so hard. Like, relax, take care of yourself, exercise, sleep, eat well. And I'm not actually sure our institutions have done a great job in trying to figure out how to do that, how to teach them how to do that. It's a hard thing, because we're fighting something larger than ourselves. But that was a lot of words at a high level to say I'm hoping the program study can really focus on non-athletes, as defined by those 35%, and athletes, to say, what would it look like to have a facility that worked for you and that drew you in. I will say one of our most popular PE courses right now, bar none, is hiking with dogs. I'm just not going to say anything else about that. You know why, right?
Just kidding. A side note really quickly, we have a lot of acronyms at the college, and Maud mentioned CDE, which is the Center for Developmental Economics. We might remember it as that strange land up along towards Route 7, and it is now so much an active part of our college now, and one of the big magnets for some of the finest economic professors in the country who vie to teach here at Williams, and they teach undergrads as well. Yes, who do we have there?
Our 50th is coming up, and several classmates have asked about the college's education plan for vets and students who are coming out of community colleges.
Oh, thank you. Were you a plant? So this project is really dear to my heart. I can't fit everything into the formal presentation. We have been seeking to build the number of what we call non-traditional students, which encompasses veterans and community college students here on campus. When I got here, I think there were 4, and we've been building over time. We're hoping to a steady state of about 40 to 50. Right now, I think we're at 38, so we've made some steady progress. And as I say, that encompasses both groups. The reason the program matters so much to me is actually now many years here and in my prior institution of engaging with students who come from these non-traditional paths. They tend to have a really outsized impact on the schools where they matriculate, and particularly here, because it's a small place, so small numbers go a long way. And so two things happen. Their impact on the school is significant, and our impact on their lives is significant. And so their impact on the school is significant because they come with life experience diversity, right? It's a different form of diversity, age diversity, experiences, and being out there solving real world problems in the way our undergraduates really haven't, and just having them in campus governance structures, on teams, many of them don't live in the dormitories if they're older, but they're obviously in the classrooms, and they just bring a perspective and experience that's really enriching. But it's also very powerful for them, because many of them are here because they have realized, in a way that actually most of our undergraduates typically don't, why they want to come to college. It's most of our undergraduates come because somebody told them they're supposed to, and they sort of understand it's the next step on the way to the rest of their lives in some kind of professional and personal growth sense. But the students who've come from a non-traditional path have said, I want a liberal arts education. I am hungry to learn in this way. I understand that this turn in my journey is so intentional. It's a very costly program. Our non-traditional students are among our most expensive, because in addition to 100% financial aid, usually they need housing, they often need childcare. We're often supporting healthcare for spouses and others in their family network. And the housing piece is particularly vexing because many of them can't live on campus over a certain age, and so we struggle in Williamstown with affordable housing for everyone. So the block between here and getting to the full number that we eventually want to get to is going to be just raising substantial funds to be able to do everything we want to do in that space. But we have been able to get, thanks also to the generosity of our alumni and the obviously the support of the college's resources, been able to grow it substantially over the last few years, which I'm really excited about.
I think all of us remember that non-traditional students, when we were going to Williams, meant 10%ers. And I think 90% of us were convinced that we were the 10%ers. I think I saw a woman raise her hand somewhere. Did I see someone? Oh, come on. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Up there? Thank you.
As we all realize, the world has been changing dramatically physically with the dramatically rising temperatures and the fires and everything else. And we're all a cause of that. And Williams as an institution has played a major role in trying to address it. Could you just tell us what it is that Williams is doing now to reduce its impact on the climate and to live and teach students how to live more sustainably?
Yeah, thank you. So a big pillar in our strategic plan was around sustainability, and the focus of that work was really twofold. One was on our educational program, because I think we have a deep belief that the biggest impact that Williams can have is educating undergraduates so that when they go out into the world, they can have a big impact wherever they go. We've had a pretty dramatic growth in the number of students that are environmental studies, who focus on environmental studies when they're here over the years. We've had a growth in faculty over time, and that program is, I think, a testament to what we can do in education, but also, just to give you a really specific example, a group of students worked with the Zilka Center last year and our facilities department to figure out how we would get to a fully electrified campus fleet. So that's a case of in terms of our vehicles. So that's a case of sort of education and administrative support and campus staff working together to make a difference on the campus, which gets me to the second point, which is where we are working, and this is a long-term plan, to think about the campus infrastructure and how to move away from our fossil fuel reliance for heating and cooling the campus. That's a very long-term project, but the first step of it is going to be, as we do, build new buildings and also, importantly, move to renovating some of our key buildings that need attention, particularly our dormitories, which have a lot of deferred maintenance and need some work, making sure that we do that in a way that prepares them for a shift in the way we heat and cool the campus as that technology evolves. It's a very complicated topic. Even the electric grid here in Williamstown can't yet support some of our most ambitious plans, so we're continuing to make the infrastructure prepared so that as technology moves, we can. I promised him that he could ask a question, so can we? I think you're next.
Just two quick questions. What is the ratio of applicants to the number of students who are accepted, and what is the freshman class size today?
Okay, so the easy answer is the freshman class size is about 550. The number of applicants varies per year, and I'm not going to be able, off the top of my head, to tell you what it was last year. But what I can tell you is that we've had, since I've been here, it's actually fluctuated for reasons that I can talk about, but somewhere between a 9% acceptance rate and a 14% acceptance rate based on outside factors and the way we've done the application process in any particular time. So that you can do the math. I'm not so good at doing that in my head, but what the number of applications was. But the one important thing to note is that a few years ago, when many of us went test optional, numbers surged. Applications surged at a variety of schools, and it didn't necessarily surge equally. So for example, we had a huge surge, not necessarily correlated to that last point, but after COVID and international student applications. So it's not just because your number surge doesn't mean it surges all sort of equally from all demographics. And then the other thing that I would note is that sort of goes up and down. Like if you put in a second essay question, suddenly, 10% drops away. So factors that are sort of that's what I mean about admissions changing all the time. You're just trying to sort of figure out. One of the last thing I'll say about this is one of the factors that many schools sort of hold up with pride is 4% admissions, 7% admission. We hold as sort of how selective we are as a point of pride, which I understand, but let's keep in mind that just means we're turning away really talented people. So, just getting to that's a small a number of people we can turn or that we let in isn't necessarily the most exciting goal, because it really does mean that we're turning away a lot of talented students. Thank you.
So thank you. And I started this with choking up. I end with choking up. When I first met you, Maud, before you became president, I filled up an entire page in teeny tiny little handwriting of all the things that I recognized in you. And the one thing I circled was, "will be great in a crisis." And I was right.
My epigraph.
But more than that, you're not just great in a crisis. You're great in the good times. You make them better, and we're very grateful to you. You have carried Williams through a lot. You're carrying us into the future. I am so proud to have served as a trustee for your board.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you.